Executive Director of Community Research Partners, who will talk to you about the report and the economics of poverty in Ohio.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see you. Thanks, Phil. Many thanks to you and your team, especially Josh and Catherine, not only for the leadership you've shown in advancing the conversation on poverty in the state of Ohio, but for being such a thoughtful and engaged client. We really appreciate it. We enjoy working with you, and we think that the 2016 State of Poverty report once again highlights important, sometimes startling facts about the nature of poverty across our state. A brief explanation for those of you who may not be familiar with Community Research Partners. We are a 501c3 operating as a social enterprise. We work with clients in Central Ohio, across the state, and across the country, using primary and secondary data, both qualitative and quantitative, to complete evaluations, needs assessments, gap analysis, that sort of thing. Any type of research that folks need to help us as we fulfill on our mission to strengthen communities through data, information, and knowledge. We've had the pleasure of working with OACA on the State of Poverty report since, I think it was 2012, so it predates me. They've been doing the report longer, but we got to join the team in 2012. And this year's edition has some intriguing new insights. I do want to acknowledge the outstanding work of Becky Zwickel. Wave your hand. Becky is she served as the project lead for this report. She was also recently promoted to assistant director at CRP for quality assurance because of how good she is. So if you want details on data and good quality data, Becky is your lady. Okay, so let's move on to the report. As usual, we began the project by working with OACA to understand the most pressing issues to address and to dive deeply into based on their experience and their expertise with community action agencies on the ground across the state. As Phil mentioned, this year the goal was to better understand how poverty might play out differently for different types of families. So for example, single parent versus two-parent households, for those families who are headed by grandparents, either with the parents or without the parents in the same household. The report relies on secondary data, the vast majority of which comes from the American Community Survey of the U.S. Census Bureau. It is important to note, I wouldn't be a proper data geek if I didn't point out that most of the data points from the census are coming from 5-year estimates, so it's not appropriate statistically to compare this year's estimate to last year's estimate because those 5-year periods overlap. So just be a little careful when you're talking about trend data. But in addition to those ACS data points, we also included third-party reports like the October 2016 Hunger on Campus report Phil mentioned. This survey conducted in early 2016 by the College and University Food Bank Alliance, the National Student Campaign Against Hunger and Homelessness, the Student Government Resource Center, and the Student Public Interest Research Group. We also relied on the Feeding America's MAP, the Meal Gap annual report, and the November 2016 report on why grandparents are raising children that was issued by the Pew Charitable Trusts. Our goal was to use all of the most reliable, valid sources of data that we could find to paint an accurate picture of what poverty looks like in Ohio. Some of what we found is not new. As Phil mentioned, the federal poverty level suggests that 14.8% of Ohioans were living in poverty in 2015, which is the most recent year for which data are available. That's down slightly from 2011 when poverty was at 16.4% statewide. But again, the calculation of the federal poverty level is increasingly seen as incomplete at best, or at worst, an inaccurate way to measure poverty. As the report details, a typical family, if there is such a thing anymore, but we consider a typical family 2 adults and 2 school-age kids, actually needs to earn at least 146% of the federal poverty level to be self-sufficient. And that just means getting their most basic needs met, like food, clothing, housing, utilities. So for a single parent with 2 kids, that's 109 hours of minimum wage work, as Phil mentioned. That leaves 59 hours for everything else. So sleeping, driving to the grocery store, making dinner, anything else, paying bills. Heaven forbid, occasionally you should get to sit down and just have a cup of tea and not do anything, right? Other details in the report are new and or seem to reflect growing trends nationwide that are alarming to say the least. For example, we've mentioned that it's 14.8% of Ohioans statewide living at or below FPL, but just over 25% of children under the age of 6 are living in poverty, while 21.2% of kids between 6 and 11 and nearly 18% of 12 to 17-year-olds are also living in poverty. Additionally, about 8% of kids in Ohio are both food insecure, meaning they don't have enough to eat, food insecure, and likely ineligible for assistance. And that rate, that Ohio rate of 8%, is nearly double the national rate. Particularly intriguing to me, consider that less than 4% of Ohioans with a bachelor's degree or higher live in poverty, while nearly 11% of those with some college, 13.3% of those with a high school diploma, and 27.3% of people without a high school degree or GED live in poverty. That evidence suggests you should get a college degree, right? It seems pretty straightforward. Yet, again, as Phil mentioned, as more non-traditional students enroll in college, we're seeing a dramatic increase in food insecurity among those students, as evidenced by the at least 12 colleges in Ohio that have food pantries on campus for their students. And then finally, it's worth noting the data on grandparents raising their children. It's a complicated issue for a number of reasons. First, grandparents rarely plan to take custody of their grandkids, not something that we typically do. So they're not likely to be emotionally, much less financially prepared for all that that entails. Second, grandparents understandably frequently don't gain legal custody for a variety of reasons, including things like the size of their house making them ineligible for standards, or even not wanting to take your own child to court to fight for custody. All of this means that many grandparent caregivers don't get the financial support of being a foster parent in an official capacity, and they suffer for that. Given that there are nearly 40,000 households, those skipped generation households where the grandparent is the head of household and the parents are not living in the household, and just over 16% of those households are at or below poverty, this isn't an issue we can easily ignore. These are just a few highlights. I'd spend all day talking about data, but y'all would get a little glassy-eyed after a while. So I encourage you to download the full report. I know it's up on OAHCA's, I can't see Catherine. It's up on OAHCA's website, yes. It's also up on the CRP website. So download that, spend some time with the data and learn more. And feel free to either reach out to me or Becky if you have questions or need any clarifications about the data points. Again, thanks to Phil and OAHCA for commissioning this report, and thanks to each of you for caring enough to listen to what we've shared this afternoon.